in the very first verse, we find out that there is a famine in the land. And so let's look at, when is this story happening? Who do we think wrote this story? And why do we think he wrote it? And why is there a famine in the land? So this is we're just setting up the context of the story. And if you remember in Leviticus 26, we read this last week, God comes to the Jewish people and he says, I'm going to make a covenant with you, which indeed he made back in Exodus. And he said, I want you to be my treasured possession, and I want you to be the royal priesthood. And if you remember, they said, we'll do everything you ask us to do. And they make this covenant with God. We call that the Old Covenant. And in that Old Covenant, we say that it's a conditional covenant. It's the only covenant that's conditional, which is the covenant that God made with Noah, unconditional. The covenant God made with Abraham, unconditional. And the covenant that God makes with us is unconditional. So this is the one conditional covenant that God makes. And it really is to set them in a position where they're looking for a Messiah. That's the overall purpose of the covenant, is that it's a picture of what they need in the future. It's to frustrate them, basically. It's to be a tutor to them so that they would be looking for a Messiah. But in the covenant, there's all of these if-then statements. And it says, if you walk in my statutes, if you love my law, and if you observe my commandments, I can promise you that you will prosper. I will bring rain and your seed will grow. You'll have peace in the land, and you'll have my presence. I will be in the midst of you. But if you despise my law, and if you don't do my commandments, if you break my covenant, it's going to be basically the opposite of that. There will be famine in the land. There will be panic in the land. You'll sow your seed in vain, meaning without rain, they could sow their seed all they wanted to. And he goes on to say that nations will come and conquer them, and he will set his face against Israel. But even within that, there's always this but that is at the end. That if they confess their sins, then he says, I will remember my covenant, which it always kind of makes me chuckle a little bit because God can't forget, right? It really is when they confess their sins, God will restore that covenant with them and bring back. So Ruby and I were just talking here a minute ago, and by the way, the reason why there still isn't peace in the land is for the same reason. God still is not done with Israel, and there never will be peace in the land completely until Jesus comes back. Unless Israel, which we know the Word of God says that they never will do this till the end, were to turn their hearts to him. And so when we looked at even Deuteronomy 30, we saw, we're not going to look that up. I was going to look it up, and then I didn't, we didn't have time. He said, if you will return to the Lord, basically, I will restore the land. So we're going to see throughout the entire history of Israel, times of famine, times of plenty, times of famine, times of plenty, time where Moab comes and takes control of the land, and then where they're beat back out of the land. And do you remember, this book is written in what period of time? It's in the first verse. The time of the Judges. And do you remember the cycle that we talked about, that the people would cry out to God, he would bring a new judge, and the judge would restore things correct, and then as soon as the judge died, what would happen? They would turn back. And so basically, we sometimes have the habit of doing this as well. When life is going good, you know, we trust God. And then when things go bad, we're like, our calamity comes in our lives, our faith is shaken. So this is you can just understand the pattern of that. So we're going to be picking up in this time where there's famine in this land of Bethlehem. And ironically enough, Bethlehem, the name of the word, is house of bread. But there is no bread at this particular moment that we're going to pick up this story. And it's going to drive Elimelech to make a decision for his family. He's going to move his family to Moab. And I want us just to get an idea of, we talked about this last week, that Moab, by the way, where did the Moabites come from? Lot, right? And Lot's daughters go into him after they've been sent out of Sodom and Gomorrah. The two children that those daughters produce, one of them Moab, which came about the Moabites. The other one came about the Ammonites, that's right, who for history were enemies of the people of Israel. And in fact, we looked up last week that before the book of Ruth is even happening, so prior, the Moabites have come into Israel and have taken control of Jericho and other areas there. And by the way, Jericho is very close to Bethlehem in physical proximity. And but then God raised up another judge that drove the Israelites back out again. Drove the Moabites back out. So I just want us to think, if we had to think of somebody who we can compare this story to, it really would be maybe someone in the Middle East, a country in the Middle East, who are our arch enemies. Does that make sense? And who want to dominate and control us. And so that's who the Moabites are to Israel. So it's a huge choice to leave the land that God told him to stay on, and Elimelech leaves and brings his family to Moab. Probably not the best decision. Because what did God want the people to do? Did he want them to leave when the famine happened? He wanted them to trust him. He wanted them to cry out and confess their sin. And we're going to see later in the story that it looks like Elimelech probably had land that he gave up to go to Moab. He sold his land to go to Moab. Probably some money to travel because there's no rain and there's a famine. So this is where we're picking up the story. And let's just review for a minute, because we're going to be talking about this through the whole lesson. This whole idea of levirate marriage. I said it wrong last week. It's levirate, which is the Latin translation of the Hebrew word for brother-in-law. And it means that the brother-in-law, the kinsman, the relative, is to fulfill a commitment to that woman. And so we see in Leviticus 25, we talked about this a lot. This is all the whole chapter of 25 is all about redeeming the land. And the overarching principle is this: the land is God's. Doesn't really belong to anybody. They're all kind of leasing the land, actually. But what God has done is he's parceled it out to these individual families. The 12 tribes, he's parceled it out. And what he wants is what he gave the Chaunceys, he wants to stay the Chaunceys. That land is mine. Not mine. The Chaunceys, actually. Because as a woman, nothing's mine in this culture. And I know that's hard for us to get our mind around. But I'm only good to make babies to pass that land on, right? And so that land belongs to Chauncey's. And so David has sold that piece of land to go and to move. And that land, by the way, when would that land automatically come back to David's lineage? The year of Jubilee. That's exactly right. And oh, by the way, if you didn't do Leviticus with us, you do not know that. That was a trick question for only my Leviticus people. But that's exactly right. God put in this incredible reset of society that after 49 years, that land would come back to me. Not me, my husband, or my husband's sons. And if I don't have any sons, then nothing. Doesn't help me at all. Yes, Ann.
But wouldn't it go to his brothers?
Okay, so here's the deal. If David dies and I do not have any children, any male children, then David's brother has a commitment to help me produce a male heir. To then take, so that then that piece of that land. I know. Am I making this way too practical?
No, you're good.
This is what the policy is, y'all.
You're good.
It's like the first time we're hearing it though.
I know. This is. Yes.
What if he didn't have a brother?
So that's a great question, and I have no answer. Because the male heir would be so important.
I think it'd be his father's brothers.
Yeah, it would probably go back to the father's brothers. You know, it just keeps passing down in the male side of the family, basically. And so this is the policy. And if the in the year of Jubilee, whoever my son produced from my brother-in-law, it would come back, and after 49 years, that land then. And by the way, that's why it was always the son's responsibility to take care of his mother. And so once you married into that family, and then that family was to take care of you as a woman. You didn't really return back home as a woman. Yes.
But in that way, women were very valuable.
100%.
So it wasn't like, oh, women are good for nothing. I mean, women gave the offspring.
Correct.
So they were, not financially, but they cared for those women because.
And so they were valuable for a completely different reason than now.
Yeah.
And that's why, today it's so hard for us to understand, because this whole, how can Naomi be so depressed in this story? Well, I mean, it's fair. In 10 years, she lost a husband and 2 sons, right? That's a lot of tragedy. But she has no hope for the future, because her entire identity is not in her job. It's not in her personality or whatever. It is in the male offspring that has been produced in her family. And so her line has come to an end. And she, so that is why she is so hopeless. And we saw this in your homework. You looked this up. I just want to touch on this for a minute, that we see in Genesis, this even happened when Judah's firstborn son, marries Tamar. And was wicked, it says, verse 7, this is Genesis 38, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and perform your kinsman redeemer responsibility. The duty of your brother-in-law to her and raise up an offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. He refuses to do what God had put into play. And let's look what happens. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God put him to death also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house. So he sends her back to her father's house. Stay a widow, don't remarry, until my youngest son, Shelah, grows up. For he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. And in the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. Judah goes up. So basically, Judah's not going to give that younger son. And Tamar knows that. And so Tamar then plans this whole trick where she tricks her father-in-law. I know. I know. She tricks her father-in-law because the father-in-law was not going to do what was right. And God, you know, it's very strange to us, but God allows really her to do this and produce Perez. She's very smart. Remember, she gets the ring. Yes, Janet.
It just hit me going back to where he sent her back to her family in light of what we already discussed. That
Right.
She's supposed to be
Right.
with her husband's family, and
Right.
his family. So he's already shown himself as unjust.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, look at what he says to her. He says in verse 26, when Judah identified these trinkets that she had taken from him, he said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not know her again. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb, and she ended up with the baby Perez and then the baby Zerah. And how fun is this that Perez is going to show up in the 4th chapter in this book? Because the people who are living in Bethlehem know this story about the kinsman redeemer. And so they're going to bring up Perez. In that they are praising God for this idea of a kinsman relationship. And I know it's completely contrary to us, but it is God's way, really, of being fair to the women and providing for them.
I wonder if that's the reason that they accepted Ruth,
I-
because that was Naomi's only possibility.
I-
Because they didn't treat her like a foreigner.
Absolutely. And neither did they treat Rahab as a foreigner. There are some others similarly. And if they became, now this is not a biblical word. We call them proselytes. I don't even know where that word comes from. It probably comes from a Greek word, actually, looking back on it. But it is someone who converted to worship Yahweh. And we're going to see that's Ruth. Yes, Mindy.
I love how Naomi is so dramatic and she renames herself and everything. But why was she so bitter? Did she not remember about the kinsman redeemer? I mean, wouldn't that have been even more impetus for her to go home? Because they were gonna take care of her, weren't they?
You're exactly what you hit the nail on the head. Why did she not think about the kinsman redeemer? Because in fact we know there's actually 2.
Yes.
There's Boaz. We're way ahead of ourselves. We haven't even read the first verse. There's Boaz and there's another. But her own faithlessness at that point, her own depression, her own hopelessness didn't even allow her to be able to count on God
Yeah.
and think forward.
Well, and your sons, you think that's your only hope.
Correct.
You don't think extended family.
Correct. Lori, did you have your hand raised?
No.
Oh. You're like, no, right? All right.
They never did ever do the Jubilee, so they weren't an obedient people in all their ways.
That's correct. They never did end up doing the year of Jubilee.
One time.
Right, right.
But Sarah, if you jump ahead, and maybe I did my homework wrong, that happens. Naomi knew about the Kingsman and
Correct.
moved it around. So that's, we have got to get to.
We have to get to that. So let's start with the very first verse. Ruth 1, verse 1. It is a great story. In the days when the judges ruled, there was famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man, Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites, which is the area of Bethlehem. So it's sort of like saying we're a Floridian, but we live in Miami. Does that make sense? So it's just telling us that he's from that area, because ultimately when we start talking about the land, this is why the land belonged to that tribe. And so that's why they keep reflecting on calling him that, because that's ultimately what is reminding the Jewish people what land belonged to him, was through this tribe of Ephraim. I say that wrong, I know. And so he says, from Bethlehem in Judah, they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. It seems to be in the timeline that she marries them off after her husband dies. These boys, verse 4, took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they lived there for 10 years. And both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the women were left without her 2 sons and her husband. And she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. Because while she's out in the fields of Moab, probably trying to find food, she heard that the Lord had visited his people and had given them food. So she set out from the place where she was, there in Moab, with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. So you kind of have the idea that they've at least started the journey. And at some point in the journey, Naomi looks at her daughter-in-laws and says, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house." I kind of think that as Naomi starts on the journey and realizes how hard this journey is going to be, 7 or 10 days, 7 to 10 days it would have taken to do this journey, all on foot, covering about 10 miles a day. And you may be thinking, well, that's not much. You know, I'm going to walk that at the breast cancer thing on Saturday. There's a breast cancer walk on Saturday. I don't know. That's why I mean that. What you have to remember is no food, little water. They are up mountains, down valleys. If you're to look at the geography of that land, it is mountainous, super. And if you've been to the Dead Sea area, it is dry and barren land. And so we can't even understand how hard this journey would have been. And at some point in that journey, Naomi looks at them and says, "Listen, each of you return to your mother's house. And she says, may Yahweh, anytime you see Lord there, that is Yahweh. May Yahweh deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. And may Yahweh grant you that you may find rest. Now, that word rest isn't the same word we would use for rest. That word rest means permanent rest and security. It probably would be better translated security in this way, because when we think of rest, we think, I'm going to take a nap because I'm tired today, right? This is deep rest for your life. You're going to find security and a place to rest. And each of you in the house of her husband, meaning go marry. Go find security by remarrying somebody. Go find security by remarrying a Moab man. Because without that, they have, in Naomi's mind, no hope. And then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? So similar to the story of Judah, is there any promise that I'm going to have sons? Turn back, my daughters, go your way. For I am too old to have a husband. And even if I had a husband, would you actually wait for that baby to grow up? So what she's saying is, if I get married tomorrow and produce a son, are you going to wait for him to grow up to be able to fulfill this commitment to you? But very importantly, and we're going to talk about this a lot more in our next lesson, what Naomi is lacking ultimately is hope. And we're going to talk about this word hope next week. She says to them, if I should say that I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? So do you see where Naomi's focus is her hope? The only way Naomi sees any hope in this situation is if God gives her a husband. So even her mindset right now is pretty narrow, that this is the only way God can answer her problem.
For the girls, even if she married.
Right. Yes.
It's interesting too that it's been 10 years and there are no children.
Yes.
So it shows you that God is sovereign and He's got a plan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And God did not want children to be produced yet. And you know, we were talking last night that, you know, probably bad decision on Elimelech's part to leave the land, to even go to enemy land, because one of the reasons God did not want them to marry Moabite women was why?
I don't.
Correct. He didn't want them to follow after their gods. But we're going to see that Naomi, I think, has already laid the seeds, already put the seed bed down to talk about Yahweh. And she even says, go home and my God, Yahweh, is going to take care of you. He's going to deal kindly with you because you've dealt kindly with me and with my dead sons. And so her only hope, and I just want us to get that, is that there was a way out of this, but Naomi couldn't see it. All she could see is her own agenda, right? Her own agenda is, I'm too old to get married to produce a son. And by the way, it would have been really out of the box thinking, though, to be fair to her, that any good Jewish man would marry a Moabite. That is out of the box. And so what Boaz does is exceptional, really. So look at verse 13. She says, would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake. You know, sometimes if I've walked through tragedy with somebody when their husband has passed away or something, you get this because not only are you feeling the grief, but you hate it for your kids, right? That they're having to now experience this grief. And that's what she means. She says, not only is it bitter for me, but it's also bitter for me for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone against me. She thinks God has turned his back on her. But she also understands God's sovereignty, that it is God who is at work here. So definitely she believes in Yahweh, but she believes that Yahweh has turned against her. By the way, have life circumstances ever made you think that God wasn't on your side and that maybe he had turned his back on you? This is how Naomi feels. Verse 14, but the girls, Orpah and Ruth, they both lift up their voices and they both weep. And Orpah kisses her mother-in-law and basically says goodbye. But Ruth clung to her. By the way, that word clung is the exact same word out of Genesis for cleave. That a husband and wife should leave their family and they should cleave together. This and what's remarkable about the word that Samuel uses here is that what we're going to see is Ruth is going to make a covenant to Naomi very much like we make at marriage. In fact, we read this in all kinds of weddings, don't we? Because she's basically going to say, till death do us part. I am going to enter into this covenant with you to follow you, follow your God. And if I break this covenant, may the Lord basically kill me. That's what Ruth is saying here. But she says it much better. And this is why we read that at the wedding. And so Naomi says to Ruth, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. And look at that. And what? And to her gods. And she says, return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May Yahweh do so to me, and more. Also, if anything but death parts me from you. And she makes that commitment that may death and being buried happen to me if anything but death separates the two of us. She is making a covenant, and she's also, we can really see her belief in Yahweh here. So Ruth, we could say this is a profession of faith. If we wanted to use our modern terminology, Ruth is making a profession of faith here. She's saying, I believe, I don't want to go back to my gods. I believe in Yahweh. And I'm saying, I want Yahweh to stand as a witness if anything but death does us part. Which, by the way, that is why we read this in a wedding, is because that is what you're saying. I'm making this covenant before God, and that may God, may only death do us part.
Sarah.
Yes.
Naomi must have been representing Yahweh big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Up to
Wasn't
this
it
point.
Up until she
Yeah.
became bitter. But,
Yeah.
I mean, for them to be, both of them, with their mother-in-law like this is...
I think so too. I think so too. And I think it's an interesting thing that both of these women have experienced the same Naomi, and they're going to make two different decisions.
Yeah.
One's
Yeah.
going to go back,
Yeah.
and one's going to follow Yahweh. And you can understand really the decision that both of them are making, but sure am thankful that Ruth made this decision, because we have Ruth ultimately in the genealogy of Jesus because of her faithfulness. Is that not the most precious sound ever? That makes me want to just stop teaching and go take the baby. Who wants to take my place? Ah, I love it.
As glory to God. It demonstrates for us even today that we don't know the influence we have.
Mm.
We don't. All of us, God will bring a younger woman along.
Mhm.
He said that the older women teach the young women. We don't know how our lives and the words out of our mouth will convince, without us being preachy.
Right?
That turns people off. But
We're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
he'll bring somebody under our wing.
But the truth of it is that even when he brings people under our wing, you know, it was interesting. I just went to my 40th year reunion and had more conversations in one weekend with people who don't know the Lord than I probably have in the last 10 years. And, you know, all my responsibility was to represent Yahweh. I cannot
Amen.
determine whether they're going to return back to their gods or turn to Yahweh.
That's right.
And I heard a great sermon, by the way, on the book of Ruth by Tim Keller. And he says that when we talk about this, we only talk about Boaz being a redeemer. But truly, Naomi has redemptive work in this book, right?
Yeah.
Because Ruth wouldn't even know Yahweh had it not been for Naomi sharing.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to this beautiful part where Ruth has redemptive work in this book, because Naomi is without hope.
That's right.
And if she did not have another woman by her side
Oh, hallelujah.
whose faith in Yahweh actually seems to be a little more than her mother-in-law at moments, it redeemed the whole story for Naomi. And so it really is this cool sermon about how even friendship can redeem.
Yes.
By the way, if you want a good sermon on the book of Ruth, Tim Keller, just Google Tim Keller sermons and it will pull it up. So Naomi saw, verse 18, that she was determined to go with her, and she said no more. And so the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. Who is this woman that's returned? Is it Naomi? Now, it's interesting that in 10 years, Naomi looks so different that they don't even recognize her. Whether life has been that hard on her, and that they would have known Naomi before. So there's some interesting things there that people say that Naomi may have been a prominent woman in the community before she left. But all we know is that the women are all, is that Naomi? Is that Naomi, right? And
Also,
so
she went to an enemy land. I mean, they could, and then they got married, and then
Right.
so you could hear the
Yeah.
talk was there. She got all her look with her
right.
son's married, and you know she went to enemy land,
And we can even fast forward in the story that Boaz knows that Naomi's back and that he's brought a Moabite woman. And so do the people who are working the land. So small community, they're talking. And verse 20, Naomi says to them, "Do not call me Naomi," which her name meant sweetness. And she says, I am not Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. And I love that she can try to change her name all she wants to, but isn't it interesting? Samuel never refers to her as Mara in this book.
Amen.
I mean, you can try to change your name, but you can try to change what God intends for you. But God intended for sweetness to be in her life. And he says, she says, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, which is such an interesting statement. Did she really go away full?
That was a famine.
There was a famine in the land.
But
She had her husband and 2 boys, right?
And she may have had no choice. I mean, the husband might have decided to leave, but she.
Correct. Yeah. And again, you can see she understands the sovereignty of God, because she says, I went away full, and Yahweh has brought me back empty. And she says, why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty El Shaddai there has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And so they're living somewhere there in Bethlehem. Now Naomi had a relative, a kinsman. That is a synonym term there, of her husband, a worthy man. Sorry, missed up my slide. A worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. The name, when they say there that he is a worthy man, in the Hebrew, it literally means a mighty man of valor. So Boaz is a great man in the community, in the area. And Ruth the Moabite says to Naomi, and this is, we see Ruth's initiative here, and we see Ruth's care over Naomi. And she says, okay, mom-in-law, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of the grain after him, which, by the way, I colored that him blue for Boaz, which is a mistake. Because she doesn't know she's going to Boaz's field at this point. She's saying, let me just go to anybody's field in whose sight I shall find favor. So we don't know who the him is there yet. But this is so cool. God knows who the him is. And she's just saying, let me go glean among the ears of grain after some man in whose sight I shall find favor. And we're going to see that this was a dangerous decision.
Oh, yes.
Both Boaz and Naomi talk later to Ruth about saying, this is dangerous. You can't be out here on your own, just gleaning the fields without the fear of danger. And so this is it's a 1 verse thing, but it shows a lot in Ruth. And I love this. So she set out. Don't you love that? She set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. Meaning as she's wandering around outside the, are y'all freezing?
Yeah.
I literally feel like everybody in the room's going. And so I love this. I did a little chart here because we're going to see God's providence, but we're also going to see Ruth's work ethic. There's so many pieces of this, and you know, it was interesting as I was sharing my story with some people this weekend. It was this interesting push and pull between decisions that I made, good and bad, and then the providence of God. And right, that's why, what's one of the sayings we always talk about looking in the past? Hindsight's 2020, right? Because you can perfectly see how things work together. And what's interesting is when you talk to somebody who doesn't know the Lord, they really get that principle. What you have to get them to see is that one whole piece of that formula is God working in that situation. And so we see here that there's some things. There is her stepping up to Naomi and saying, I'll take care of this. I'm going to go glean. We see her setting out by herself, going out into the land. We're going to see here in a minute that she works hard. The workers who see her out there working say she's working hard. She's not just asking for handouts. And we're going to see God working through her own decisions that she just happens to step on to Boaz's land. And you love Samuel, who's writing this. He knows Yahweh well. And so I'm sure he's putting that word. She just happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. So at some point, Boaz's workers have gone out and talked to her, or have at least recognized her. So Boaz just happens to come from Bethlehem, and while Ruth is there. And so two things happening at the same time. We see Boaz coming from Bethlehem, and he says to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. We can see from the very beginning with Boaz, his character, that as he speaks to his servants, the blessings of God, and they speak back to him. And so Boaz looks out across the land, and he sees a woman out there working in the land that he doesn't recognize. We're going to see in a minute in the story that there are other young women who are working. And he says to the young man who's in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? Now, we don't like that kind of language because we're like, she doesn't belong to anybody. She's Ruth. But in this day, you belong to either your husband, your family clan, or if you were a servant, you would belong to Boaz. So as Boaz is looking out, he has young women who are working too, and he looks at her and says, I don't recognize her. She doesn't belong to me. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said to us, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So all she wants to do is pick up what drops naturally onto the ground. So she came, and she's continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, so Boaz goes out to talk to Ruth, and he's going to make everything much easier for her. He says, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but you keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on this field that they're reaping, and stay with them. Go after them. And he says, and I've told my servants to not touch you. And when you're thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. So he has taken this woman And he is now having his servants help her even with her drinking, having the water there, clean water for her to drink, and says, I want you to hang out with my young women. Do not leave my field, because I don't want you hurt. I don't want you in someone else's field. And she falls on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I, this Moabite woman, found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, I've heard all that you've done for your mother-in-law. So Ruth's reputation has gone ahead of her.
That's right.
And Boaz has heard about this Moabite woman who has served Naomi faithfully, and since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and your mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. So I want you to think of I'll come to. This is basically someone who would come in our day and time, someone who doesn't know anything about the culture. She comes and she's now providing for her mother-in-law. Yes, Cheryl.
It also speaks to Boaz, because a man of great character would see character in someone else, and someone with low character would just say, oh, you wouldn't even notice that. But
Absolutely.
He clues in on what's really important on faithfulness and
Absolutely.
all that.
He sees this woman, and here's the thing, Boaz knows that he's related to Naomi. Too. This is not a surprise to anyone. But Naomi,
He's not first in line, too.
but he's not first in line. And so Boaz has no right to claim Naomi. But he does want to make sure that they're provided well for because of Ruth's faithfulness.
I think it's so sweet that he calls her my daughter.
Yes. And many believe that it's a testimony that there was a little bit of an age difference there. They think that he's the brother-in-law, honestly, of Elimelech. And so that he was a younger brother-in-law. That's kind of what commentators commentate about. But it doesn't say that. And we don't really have proof of that.
Verse 9 got me. She's something getting excited. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. And to stay
Right.
in these boundaries to keep her safe. So today, God tells us, stay in my field.
Right.
Stay in these boundaries.
Yeah.
So that you are kept safe. One, from idolatry.
Right.
From assaults.
Yeah.
He is our kinsman.
That'll preach.
Redeemer is the avenger.
Yeah.
He's the one who is the protector.
Right.
So here we have Boaz, who is now protecting her.
Yeah.
Now in our American culture, we resist the idea of boundaries. We resist the idea
Right.
of somebody
Yeah.
covering us.
But you're right. Jesus is our Boaz. He is our kinsman redeemer. And he does want to produce for us. And he does want us to stay in his field. That's good.
And I think it was Cheryl that said about his character. I mean, he has a lot going on. He's so paying attention to every little thing. I mean, this is a man who has his finger on everything. I mean, boom, who's that new person? And a lot of times I think when we have a lot to take care of, we get sloppy and we're not really stewarding every little thing. And he seems like such an honorable. I mean, for him,
And look at this. look at this next statement, because he blesses Ruth.
Yes.
And he ultimately says, what I'm doing for you, I'm doing because of Yahweh. And he says, may Yahweh repay you
Yes.
for what you've done.
Yes.
With a full reward be given to you by Yahweh. And he says, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz is acknowledging that Ruth is following after Yahweh and ultimately depending upon Yahweh for her needs. And that word, and it's so sweet, because what Ruth's going to say to him in the very next chapter is, not only do I want to be under Yahweh's wings, but I want to be under yours as well. Because that is truly how she finds that safe, that security, that way back in chapter 1, Naomi says, go back, that you may find some safety. And Ruth says, I don't want that kind of safety. I want to be safe with Yahweh.
Come on.
I want to be safe this way. And so, and also so cool that what Boaz says in verse 12, may the Lord repay you for what you've done. I love this, that Boaz is going to be used to fulfill what he even prays for her. Does that make sense?
Come on, God.
It's sort of like
Come on,
saying, I pray that God's going to provide for you financially. And then me actually in the future providing for you financially, right? Like he's going to actually fulfill the blessing that he puts on. And he says, then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoke kindly to your servant. Can you imagine? We're going to look up that word comforted, so I'm not going to say anything about it. Not going to say anything. Control my tongue. Though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here. And even, so this is that afternoon meal that they would have in the field. Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. Can you imagine? She's in the field and she's smelling the food being cooked, right? She's not promised a meal. And then Boaz says to her, we're going to make all the comparisons in the future because God invites us to his table as well.
He does.
And he feeds us himself. And that's exactly, look at what it says, dip your morsel in wine. So she sat beside the reapers, but it's Boaz who passed the food to her, passed to her roasted grain. And she ate it until she was satisfied and she had some left over. So she's bringing home her doggy bag, right, from the restaurant. And she's bringing it home for Naomi. And then she rose to go back to work. And Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves. So do you hear the difference here? Now he's saying, let her get the first fruits of the stuff. She doesn't have to be getting it off the ground, just gleaning, is picking up what's fallen on the ground. Let her now make her work easier. Let her actually have from among the sheaves and do not reproach her. And not only that, I want you to do some of the work for her. I want you to pull from some of the bundles for her and leave it for her to glean and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and we're going to see this 2 times. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. And so, the best way to look at this is, by the way, when we get here in a minute, they're going to be on this gleaning floor, and it would have been an elevated, very hard surface. And so what they're doing is they're going out and getting these stalks, and they're coming and they're throwing it on this hard surface. And then they would take the animals that would walk back and forth to crush it. Sort of think about when you see grapes being crushed into like a juice. But then they're crushing it on like a tarp. It would be a big piece of cloth, and then they throw it up in the air, and the wind would take the shaft and the seed would fall. And then they throw it up in the air again, and the wind would take the chaff, and at the end, what was left was the valuable seed on the ground. And we're gonna see that was a risky time to leave your crops. So it was not unusual that Boaz would sleep with his stuff at that point. When they're at that point they're not in the picking or growing, they're in the actual manufacturing of the product. Boaz is going to be more involved, and it's more of a security risk. He's going to sleep actually right there with his product. And so she as well beats it out. So she ends up with 30 to 40 pounds of barley. That's heavy.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And she's walking with that 30, 40 pounds of barley back into Bethlehem. And her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she also brought out and gave her the food that she had left over from being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where in the world did you glean today?" By the way, I added world there. It's not in mine either. "And where have you worked?" And what she knows is that somebody had to help her. Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi says to her daughter, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "By the way, the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And it's not even the whole thing of Ruth's faithfulness, Boaz's faithfulness gives Naomi, it's like literally it opens up her eyes that she's like, oh, this makes sense. Of course Boaz is going to honor Ruth and myself because he is one of our kinsmen. He's one of our redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, you shall keep close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted." So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Somewhere in that time, her mother-in-law hatches the plan. It says then. We don't know when the then is. It sounds like then is at the end of kind of this time, which would have been closer to about 60 days from where the story picks up with Ruth going in the field. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, says to her, "My daughter, should I not seek," see that word again, rest? "Should I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you?" And she says to Ruth, "Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Now, we don't have as much time as I want to talk about this. There are so many things going on here. Number one, she wants to keep both Boaz and Ruth from having this public embarrassment of having this conversation in public. I think Naomi is wise in choosing to put this in a situation where it's private, and that this is why. Could be a little bit of a trick too. She could be trying to, but I think more than anything, she's just trying to keep it from being publicly embarrassing. Also, it's so interesting that in just a minute, we're gonna see Ruth basically propose marriage to Boaz.
And he's flattered.
And he's flattered, by the way. But Naomi doesn't tell her to do that. Look at what Naomi says. Naomi says, he'll tell you what to do. Kind of banking on that Boaz would maybe propose marriage to her. But we're going to see Ruth being courageous enough to say, I want you to put your wings around me. And so she goes down, does just what Naomi says, and when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heat grain, and then she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now, I don't know what the uncovering of the feet is for. Most of the research that I've done has indicated that it was really to wake Boaz up.
Yeah.
That he would notice that he's uncovered. And so, and it works. At midnight, the man startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Now, the laying at the feet is a place of submission. It's a place of chastity. She's not laying beside him, trying to sleep with him. She is laying at his feet as a sign of humbleness, respect.
She's
And
also discreet.
Discreet, absolutely.
She's very, very discreet.
Right.
And that would speak well to Boaz of continuing to speak well of her character.
Correct. And I think that's why Naomi wanted to, and said, wait till everybody's asleep. And then you could see her, she comes softly. It's like she's tiptoeing. And he says, who are you? It's very, very dark. We're going to see in a minute that she gets up and leaves before it's light enough for anybody to even see. So he says to her, who are you? And she says, I am Ruth, your servant. Because that's how he has taken her already on. Now, we think, I'm not my husband's servant, you know. In this context, she is saying, you have already showed your kindness to me. She's not being his servant. She is saying, you've already taken me in as your family. And she says to him, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. We're going to talk about that so much more. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, meaning you coming to me in this kindness is even greater than the kindness of which you've treated Naomi, in which you've treated the dead son. She's been known to honor everybody she has walked with in life. And he says to her, listen, you could have married a younger man. So we see a little bit of an age difference here, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Her reputation has done so well. Yes?
Why did Naomi feel like that she was beat for her to do this to keep from being embarrassed?
I think to suffer the embarrassment, if Ruth was to walk up and like try to propose marriage to Boaz or put Boaz in a position. So I think Naomi wanted Boaz, because here's the thing, Ruth could have stayed one of his servants, and they could have continued eating forever. But that wouldn't have solved the overall problem of creating an heir.
Okay.
And
Hence
so,
Naomi's,
correct.
Thought he might say no, maybe.
Yes,
part of her plan.
yes, is for that it would be discreet, so that it wouldn't be. And maybe Naomi has figured out as well that there is a closer redeemer, because Boaz knows that right away, doesn't he? He says, now it's true, I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer closer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if not, if he's not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but arose before anyone could recognize her. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor, protecting her reputation.
Right.
And he said, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. And he measures out 2 weeks' supply more of barley and sends her on the way back into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, Naomi said, how did you fare, my daughter? And then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, this 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. I don't know. I think it's interesting that maybe he was like, good job, Naomi, sending Ruth to me. I don't want you going home empty-handed to Naomi. Boaz seems to be very inclined to take this woman to be his wife. And she replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today.
Plus, I think he's kind of trying to curry favor with Naomi, thinking potentially this is going to be my mother-in-law.
100%. And Naomi would have moved right in with Boaz and Ruth.
Don't you feel like it's sort of a love story?
Oh, 100%. Sweet love story. Now Boaz, very quickly, Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. And so everything had to happen at the city gate. This was their courthouse of the day. Boaz knew what he needed was a quorum of people. So he's going to set this up perfectly, that he's going to invite this Redeemer to sit down, and he's going to make sure, verse 2, that there's 10 men of the elders of the city, and he invites them to sit down. He says to the Redeemer, Naomi has come back from the country of Moab and is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. Now that's deceiving. It's not Naomi selling it.
Yeah.
It means someone else owns it, but somebody needs to buy it back for Naomi. You're actually buying it back from someone else. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders, and if you will redeem it, redeem it. But if not, tell me, that I may know, for there's no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he's saying, I'll take the land. And the man says, yeah, I'll redeem that land, because then I can plant on it. I can grow those crops until the year of Jubilee, right? And so he says, Boaz says, okay, but the day you buy the land from the hand of Naomi, don't forget, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite widow, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. And the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Whatever was going on in his family, with his wife and with his kids, he was not willing to redeem that, because he didn't want Naomi. He didn't want the conflict of having another boy that would eventually get the land. Mm-hmm. If a son had not been born, then he would got that land. But the way this is, he's like, oh, Well, if I'm only gonna have it for a little while, anyhow, then I don't want it at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so they take off a sandal to make the deal. He takes off his sandal, gives it to the other, because this is the way of making a contract, basically. And the Redeemer says to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he drew off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders, you're witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also, look what I get. Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are the witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the whole house of Israel, meaning they're the birth mothers who produced Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrath and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be, I love this, we're going to talk about this so much more, but we're running late. Blessed be the Lord, blessed be Yahweh, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He, this little baby, shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. So now what's really cool is now the Redeemer is Obed. The ladies are saying Obed is the Redeemer. He's going to restore your life and be the nourisher of your old age. So she went from empty to her arms full, didn't she? For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. That is such a huge statement, y'all. We'll come back to that. What these women are saying is 7 sons. What's the number 7? Perfection, right? No matter how great your sons would have been, they would not have been as great as this Moabite daughter-in-law. And Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him the name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. And they named him Obed. And then he gives us the genealogy. And this, we're going to talk so much more about this. I did a terrible job with my slides today. I apologize. But we see here in the history of David the king, way up we see Perez by Tamar gives birth. Those are all the male names. The female names are white. Oh, and we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
But Boaz is the child of Rahab.
Yeah.
And Rahab is a Gentile prostitute. So you've got to think how much Boaz saw possibly in Ruth because of who his mother was. And think about how Rahab had raised Boaz to be the man that he was. I mean, there's so much there. But then Obed was produced by Ruth, who gave birth to Jesse, who became the father of the king. And then David gives lineage down ultimately to the King of Kings. And we'll talk about this next week, that it is unbelievable that when Matthew gives the genealogy of Jesus, he lists these very women in that genealogy.
Yes.
Right? And so of all the women that are listed, you got these women listed in the genealogy of Jesus. So sorry we're late. Let me pray for us. God, we just love this book so much. We love this story. God, it's so interesting in this story that we don't see you actually speaking to anybody. We don't actually see your hand directly coming in and working. But God, we see you in every single word and verse that's in this book. That God, you have been working, and you are working in this situation. And God, ultimately, you have provided the redemption for Naomi, for Ruth, God, even for Boaz. And that he is renowned in Bethlehem, that they literally read his story every year in Jerusalem. And God, you don't get much more renowned than that. And so God, we just thank you so much for how we see you working.